Welcome to GrayPrimer, a weekly show that's mostly about miniatures. My name is Nick, I'm your host, and in this episode I'm unboxing Mantic's Plague Reserve Force for Warpath. The miniatures hobby is so multifaceted. You can be into like building or painting or shopping or lore or playing, or there's probably a bunch of other things that I've missed there. You might be just really into 3D printing miniatures, you might be into airbrushing, and you might just be into like scenery building or something like that. And it all lives within the same hobby, which is just incredible. And what you're into might change from week to week or month to month. For me, as far back as I can remember, it's been all about the building. I just love building kits. So much so that friends will now send me their kits to unbox and build for the channel, and then I ship them back to them once they're built and primed. It gives me content for the channel, and they get fully built kits sent back to them. It's a pretty good deal. And as a bonus, I get to play with all the new toys without having to pay for them. Sure, I only get them briefly, but I get them for the best part, the unbox and the build, in my opinion. But there are times when I want to buy something and own it for myself, even if I'm never going to paint it. Listen, if Ollie from Broadsword Wargaming is watching, I'm totally going to paint all these things. Absolutely. I promised I would. I definitely will. But for someone like me, a kit builder, what is it that attracts me to one set over another? Because I'm not tied to like a faction or a game system or even a scale. I could go with anything. And really, it's the rule of cool. And that's the type of kit I'm looking at today from Mantic. It just jumped out at me from the website. It was like loads in it, well priced, and it looks like a lot of fun. You've got a Dropship, you got a Buggy, you got a couple of mechs here, and what's not to love there? But let's go get it built and see if it lives up to the coolness of this front picture. Back soon. In this case, we're looking at the Plague faction within the Warpath universe. I have got Plague before from Mantic. This little aberration here is a very cool miniature. Highly recommended. It's got a nice weight to it as well. And I use this as one of the sort of large monsters within Blood Bowl. Look at it. It's made for Blood Bowl. It's pretty much just knuckling down on the scrimmage line, ready for the snap and for it to kick off. Got the microscopic Mantic branding up top. Nice Warpath universe thing there. Good images of the miniatures. And the faction branding on the side there. And then on the back, it gives you the details of what you actually get in the kit. So let's just get stuck in here. As with all the Mantic sets, you can collect the Mantic points up top here. And then just redeem those against gifts on Mantic's own website. That's pretty cool. So let's have a look. If you've only ever built Warhammer kits up to this point, or Airfix, Tamiya Bandai, whatever it might be, you're probably going to look at a box full of just baggies with a certain amount of fear. Where do you start? Which bag corresponds to which miniature? What gets glued to what first? Are they plastic? Are they resin? Who knows? And it's a little bit of the interesting thing about putting together Mantic kits, but also the frustrating thing. You just really don't know what you're doing until you start to dry fit bits. And, these are just unmarked bags of stuff. Few recognizable components as you look through. There's a big old chainsword there, so I'm assuming that's part of the mech. Flight base, okay, so that's the Dropship. A couple of round bases there. They look 50 mil. So they could be the mechs, I guess. Yeah, they'd have to be the mechs. And then this bubble wrap baggie of what feels like pewter. Like metal parts. Okay, so it's like looks like a huge rifle. Maybe an alternate weapon. So where do you start? And I don't really have an answer for you, apart from just opening bags and seeing what you recognize. I'm guessing this gigantic thing here is the Dropship, but there could be components of the little buggy, the what they call the Plague Mule transport in there as well, or maybe it's somewhere else. I can see wheels over here on this one, so maybe that's where that lives. But On the actual Mantic website, there's nothing. It just shows you images of the various units. And I can't really see anything on YouTube either. Certainly nothing produced by Mantic. There are a few YouTubers out there who have done a run-through of component parts of this. The Hornet Dropship, the Mule Buggy. But it would be cool to see something from Mantic. A little, just a very quick how to build guide. If such a thing exists, please comment below and link that video. That would be great. But I haven't been able to find anything there. But let's have a look at what's in some of these bags to get an idea of where we're actually at here. So I figured I'd start with the largest bag here, and it does turn out that this is the Hornet. You can see part of the tail of it there. And the great news is that this is hard plastic. So polystyrene cements are going to be perfect for gluing these together. You don't have to use super glue like you would do with resin kits. So that's great news. It at least gives you that choice. But very well made. And this looks like some kind of I guess, the main body of the thing for putting probably an armored compartment for troop carrying. I don't know what this part is for. I think this is a duplicate part. I don't see a corresponding other half to it. So it looks like that might be an extra. I'll have a much better idea when I actually have the thing built. This stuff clicks together really well. But yeah, I've never had any real problems with Mantic components being missing or anything like that. And I've ordered quite a few Mantic kits. And here's the next one. This is the Plague Mule Transport. And yeah, you can see a nice sort of the chassis of it here. Really thick, really solid plastics. Like the Dropship, we're not talking about a massive amount of detail on it. There are a few sort of features there. This doesn't have any of the sort of riveting that you would expect on a vehicle like this. But I guess it does leave you with quite a blank canvas for about weathering and stuff. A few mold lines, a few sort of, rough edges there as it's come off the sprue. And yeah, I mean, we're talking more or less a blank canvas here for adding in your own details when you come to paint this or add decals or whatever. Of course, this kit doesn't come with decals, but if you have decals, and for that I actually recommend, there's some great stuff over at Green Stuff World. Check out their decals. I do like the mechanism on the handle here. That's kind of cool. But again, we're looking at something here that's not overly complicated in its looks. Certainly there are a lot of tiny component parts. Hopefully you can see them there. So it may be complicated to build without any instructions, but I've got the images from the website. There's the image on the box cover there, so hopefully that'll be enough. So this just got a lot more interesting. Just going to zoom in on these components. So it looks like these are alternative body panels for the Plague Mule, and these actually do have quite a bit of detail on them. They're battle damaged, and unlike the other component there, these actually have sort of the windows cut out of them. The side panel, which had that cool handle on the door, you can see the damage there as well, where they've taken some serious caliber rounds. And that just makes this so much cooler. Just makes me think why they put the other one in. Maybe it's just so you could use it with a different faction. And then you have these deadly looking wheel spikes. This is so much cooler than I thought. Got like a spiky bull bar here too. And now check this out. The Hornet's exactly the same. So the Dropship has the same battle damaged panels and components here. There's shattered windows there. This is just like, I had no idea. I had no idea because I don't think it's mentioned anywhere. And look at these cool alternate weapons or maybe wingtips or something. And now here we have the final kits. Two of these, so I'm only opening one. I'm assuming they're both the same. If I'm wrong, we'll find out later on. So let's have a look at these individual ones. I mean, these are all heavy weapons, but this looks like some kind of energy cells here. Very nice. Beautifully sculpted armored hand there on it as well, with the finger on the trigger. Big old chain sword. And again, lovely sculpting on the hands. Whoa, serious flash there. So there is going to be some cleanup with these. But look at that sculpting. Look at the thumb around the grip of it. Just see the fingertips there too. Another great sculpt on the hand there. Another great chunk of sprue flash. There is some cleanup in this. I can even feel mold lines as I'm running my fingers over it. So there's a bit of work to be done here. And in the case of this mech, you have the corroded component here, the corroded variant, or the factory fresh one, within the same baggie. So they're all just in together. And that is just such a cool way to approach a miniature like this. You could easily have sold these as two completely separate minis. But what Mantic have done here is just give you the variants all in one box. Now that's cool. I will be back with whatever way these are going to build in a few moments. See you then. So here it is, the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Plague Reserve Force from Mantic's Warpath. And actually there's good and bad. I don't think there's anything ugly. I think that overall these are some really nice looking kits. This dropship to start with is a decent enough size. But how does it actually measure up as a miniature? Just put this flight stand out of the way, and kudos to Mantic for making really solid flight stands. This is beautifully designed. Absolutely no complaints about that. Really nice bit of kit. When I look at the dropship itself, it is a good solid piece of equipment. The little turbines, you don't have to glue those in place. You can if you want. But I like being able to turn them to show like the VTOL, the vertical takeoff and landing capabilities of this. I thought that was kind of neat. And it would make for some interesting pictures. I do like the drop down doors and this container area at the back, which could be for equipment or it could be for troops, I suppose. And definitely nice interior details. You can see the door there through into the cockpit area. The little winglets here at the end of the main wing and the tail. There are a couple of different versions of these. I went with the ones that looked a bit rough and ready. They look battle worn. They look a bit cobbled together with a bit of a blade going on it here. And some battle damage across the top. And I guess this is supposed to represent the plague version of this as opposed to the clean Imperial looking version. But I didn't really see it that way. I kind of liked the idea of this being an elite unit of Imperial Guard, and that they'd heavily modified this dropship. It had seen a lot of action, and that they wore that as a badge of pride rather than taking it and getting it all fixed up and made all shiny again. And I very much like this poor geezer who's strapped to the front of it here. I don't know whether he's dead or alive, but he's not in a good way. And like I said, I don't feel there's any ugly, but what's the bad? Well, I really don't like this seam, which runs all the way across the top of the vehicle here. I don't understand why the decision was made to split it there, when you could have easily split it here, or across, all the way across here. And then it would have been hidden by the actual structure of putting the wings on. It's just a bizarre choice for me. And it just means I'm going to have to patch this up. I filmed this in raw plastic rather than post-priming, just to show you little elements like that, because that's stuff that I'll want to fix before I prime it. I'd also like to talk a little bit about the experience of putting this together. And as you saw in the unboxing, this was a large bag of just bits. There were some incredibly tiny bits in there as well, some of which didn't make it to the final build. There were only a handful of images on their website to use as a guide, and there was one main image on the box with a little bit of a close-up detail on the container part, but nothing in the way of instructions. And when you're dealing with something as large as this that also has an alternate build in its so-called plague version, added to the confusion like random panels, and actually half of the main container unit back here was supplied as a accidental extra. And of course, when you're just looking at a big tray full of bits and pieces, this is a frustrating experience putting it together. And I would really appreciate them putting up an exploded diagram of it in a PDF, just showing in black and white where everything is supposed to go. So that's the dropship. But what about the little buggy? As is the case with all of these, no instructions, but I found this to be a much quicker build. Again, I like the rough and ready kind of Mad Max post-apocalyptic details, these spiky wheels and stuff, but much like the other vehicle, not as a plague thing for me, but more of a battle-hardened frontline elite force within the Imperial Guard. That this is their everyday runabout, and that it is almost completely trashed, but that there's no way they would want to trade it in for a nice shiny version. Lots of loose components again, lots of trial and error. I did manage to retain the tailgate without having to glue that in place, and the rotating interchangeable turret as well, because as you can see there are a couple of different variations on the main gun. But a solidly made little buggy in comparison to the likes of an ATV. This is an Astartes one. I think it sits really well beside the ATV, and again it's a vehicle that's designed for normal humans rather than these sort of genetically enhanced dudes. So you kind of feel that you could maybe get sort of 3 on each side here sitting down, 1 on the gun, and then 2 piloting it inside. Certainly feels like there's enough space for that many Imperial Guard in there. So that's kind of neat. I did like that buggy. Again, no instructions, but you just wing it and hope for the best. So that's the dropship done, the little buggy done, and I think it's time we had a look at some mechs. So again, a big bag of bits and pieces, but unlike these two, I was able to find a PDF image on Mantic's website of quite a bit of detail. Not exactly an exploded diagram of the mechs, but more detail certainly than either of these two. From that, I could tell what was supposed to be shoulder armor and knee pads and all of that stuff. I was also able to discover that the cockpit can be closed or can be opened. So closed is just solid piece of plastic here, so it's up to you whatever way you go with that. You could certainly have reflections and iridescent effects or whatever you want. But these are pretty solid builds. I was very, very happy with these mechs. Look at the gun on this dude, and I like that the fingers are curled around it here. You can see the thumb up the side, so there's lovely detail on how that's being held. I was very pleased with this entire build. Again, all those bits, it is fiddly, takes a little bit of patience, and I had to use a mixture of plastic cement and super glue. The super glue really was just to give me that little extra bit of grip and stability. It's heavy enough, but it seems to be very stable, especially with the super glue in place. If you were going to go the route of the alternate weapon, which is this huge lump of white metal, I guess pewter, that would need to be pinned or some very serious epoxy resin or something like that to hold it in place. I personally didn't like the design of it. It was a weird double bullpup kind of deal going on. I don't know what that's supposed to be. I much preferred this thing. I just think this looked so much cooler. Looked like a big old double super powered energy weapon. Even the emitters or whatever at the end here looked pretty ninja to me. So big fan of that. Big fan of this whole kit actually. I modified mine so that it's standing on the recently squished corpse of some poor guardsman. I think he was a zombie, so that's okay. But I think it gave it a lovely bit of drama. And with the other mech, I went a completely different direction. So remember, this is exactly the same kit. So this is version 1 that I went with. And within the same kit, I was able to create this, which looks like a completely different kit. And that's so cool. The camouflage cloak around the waist there and on the shoulder too. This big chainsaw fist thing that he's got going. You can see the fingers all curled around it as well. So it's not like it's hardwired into the arm. This is a weapon that he's holding that he can throw away if it runs out of fuel. And then the other weapon was some big flamer type of unit, which was very cool as well. And tons of detail throughout. I like the little rocket pods for the shoulders as well. And I'm not sure if that's how Mantic envisioned this cockpit looking when open, but I took my cues from the likes of the tactical warsuit and thought that this worked really well. But I really enjoyed making this into a little bit of a narrative here. You can get a sense for the person behind the machine, and I think that one works really well too. Especially like the cloaks and everything. And once again, I feel that these are some components that Mantic put into this to have it represent the plague side of things. But for me, it just added to the story I was trying to tell with this being an elite Imperial Guard unit. And speaking of the tactical warsuit, how does that compare? And I think it compares pretty well. I mean, the tactical warsuit is huge, but if you look at the actual passenger compartment here, and that's in the Astartes, you get a feeling that this probably works really well alongside it. And it certainly lines up very well against the likes of a Dreadnought here. So I am becoming a bigger and bigger fan of this the more I look at it. And let's look at this one with a closed cockpit against something like a Sentinel. And it just seems to fit really, really well. There is nothing between them there. The scale just feels right. So I am absolutely a big fan of those mechs. The dropship I'd probably give like a 3 out of 10. Really don't like the seam that runs across the top of it, and I don't like the fact that there's no decent PDF showing an exploded diagram of it to help you try and work out how to build this thing. For the little buggy, I do like it. There are some nice details. I like these handrails at the back here. The interchangeable turret. The working tailgate is a cool touch. I would like to see it scaled up slightly, and I would definitely like to see instructions. So it's hurt by the instruction side of things. Maybe a 5 out of 10. Scaled up PDF, you could be knocking on the door of 7 or 8 out of 10. As for the mechs, I'm going to be raving about these for a while to come. They work really well alongside Imperial Guard. They feel thematically on point. I love the weapons options. I love the posability. And I think that they represent really, really good value for money. A proper PDF showing instructions. And the reason I'm saying PDF is because I don't think it necessarily needs you to put an instruction leaflet in with the kit, because I understand the environmental impact of that, and also that it could raise the cost of each unit that you sell. But surely there can't be that much cost involved in assigning someone the role of going into Photoshop and creating an exploded diagram of each of these. It doesn't have to be a detailed instruction manual. It just has to show all of the components and roughly where they go and what the miniature looks like. Each miniature looks like from all angles. Mantic do not have to go the Warhammer route. They don't have to go for the full color, this is where all the changes are, this is where the glue goes, all that stuff. No, I mean, that's great. If you could do it, do it. But a web link to an exploded diagram that displays in a PDF, printed on the box, that's all it takes. But that wraps it up for Mantic's Warpath Universe Plague Reserve Force kit here. And I will be going back over to that other UK miniatures manufacturer next week. I'm going to have a look at some Chaos kits with the Start Collecting kit for Chaos Marines from Warhammer, and also the Vex Machinator, who knows. But that's coming up next week. Until then, take care and bye-bye.